page, second page, third page. That's how he assigned weight to figure out the media agenda. But the feminism-Marxism question, I'm not sure that you would, make a direct branch to it, but the meme, there's this concept of a cultural meme. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept. It's the idea that there are ideas that replicate like viruses through a society. They start somewhere and then they just kind of pop up everywhere. And I think this emancipatory ideal comes out of, it was a meme, it just started to pop up in a lot of places. There's a whole theory of cultural diffusion that's built around this concept of memes. So I don't know. I mean, usually you will find feminism in the critical tradition section of books. And so, but I again, am not feminism is not my strong suit. Now, you did run into Habermas quite a bit through this. And the reason you run into Habermas in our communication stuff is because he has labeled his theory as a theory of communicative action. That is his title of his 3 books, The Theory of Communicative Action. And he builds that around these ideas of speech act theory, that words do things. So we were talking about this in class, right? That a word can be perlocutionary or illocutionary, or and it has a function that's intended to accomplish an act in society. So Habermas builds on that and says that we need to engage in speech acts that create the consciousness, the true consciousness of the liberation and the emancipation for us. And we do that through communication, through a particular kind of communication, which takes place in the ideal speech situation. Now, Habermas is a modernist. So if you think of it just roughly, that postmodernists threw out truth. Modernists believed that there was reason in the world, that the world was moving somewhere, that there was progress, that we were getting better and better, and that there were things that were true. Postmodernists came and said, we're not moving anywhere, we illusion ourselves into thinking we're going somewhere, we're killing ourselves, there's no truth, there's only local truth. And Habermas wants to say, don't give up on rational conversation. Postmodernist wants to say, rationality is a form of oppression, because you're requiring people to fit into a model. So, we don't want to do that. Well, Habermas says we really don't have many other choices for how we're going to live together. We have to talk together. And he says in any speech situation, there are some things that are evident. That people believe that they can talk to each other, that people believe in that they can discern truth together, that they can talk together and figure out what's true. So Habermas talks about a dialogic transcendental truth. He says that it is evident in the speech behaviors of humans that we believe that we can reach truth through dialogue, through conversation.
Is that what back to Plato said, when we said rhetorical, right?
Well, that's an interesting thought.
When you talk about the states,
Right, Plato believed you could reach truth through dialectic. Right. But he believed in objective truth,
Okay.
right? That there was a real world and a shadow world. Habermas is not getting there to a transcendent world with a capital T. He's getting to a transcendent world with a small t. Whereas a postmodernist is like, no. There's no such thing as transcendent truth. There's my truth. I have truth. And Habermas must say, we have truth together. And if we can come together in this ideal speech situation where everybody participates, in a non-coerced way, in a safe environment, participates, then we will achieve what for us becomes the transcendent truth that we work on the basis of. I mean, it's a way of trying to deal with a fragmented social world today. So Dietz, in his article here, says, and even the woman with the Paris article there, sometimes Paris is always more than Paris. I don't know if you managed to get that far in your reading. But all of them say Habermas is kind of idealist, but we don't have many other options. We should follow that road and see how we can amend that road if we're going to learn to become this. So, what do we want to do? We could talk about muted group theory. We could talk about Carol Gilligan. Any of those names? We could talk. Probably we should talk about Dietz's critical theory of organizational culture. Maybe let's do that for a while. So, so to bring this down to an organization, Dietz, and you can see it in his article there too, in his writing in Craig's book. Dietz says, you get into an organization and communication is distorted in many ways. And he says it is systemically distorted. So he's basically applying neo-Marxist approaches to organizational communication within organizations. He says if you look at the communication that goes on in organizations, it's designed to create a false consciousness in the workers of the organization. It's designed to make them think that if they cooperate with management, their interests will be taken care of. And the reality is, Dietz says, their interests are not being carefully cared for, and you can see that in different ways. So it's kind of a mini world for critical analysis. So Dietz asks the question, whose interest are the newsletters, the company brochures, the motto, all of this stuff? It may appear to be like it's all for us. But when you get down to it, what it's doing is serving a few and using the many people. So, and we do, he says that what we have to understand is that through the language we use within this corporation, we create the corporation. So it's not like we're lying when we say things, because nothing exists except what we create by what we talk about. But we create inhumane organizational life. Managerial control takes precedence over representing long-term interests, company health. Managers have interests to preserve their roles and to benefit financially. And so that takes precedence over long-term health of the company, and conflicting interests within the company, get suppressed. So for instance, you might have a company where you have too few workers doing the work, right? You're right-sized. This language, right? You're right-sized. You know, someone said to me, you know, a company that says it's lean and mean is starving and dying, you know? You know? So the language you use makes a difference. So you have a company where they have a few people doing a lot of work, and this is not a long-term possibility to maintain this. It's not going to work. What it is serving is the bottom line of bringing in the most revenue for the least amount of expenditures. Well, what kind of communication from the management goes to the workers to make them believe that this is the right thing? Oh, you're doing a great job. Here's a bonus. You're terrific. We don't know what we'd do without you. You know, so you feed communication to them, but you don't listen to them, and you don't let them have a voice in how it works. So this is Dietz's approach. He says you must have. We often run organizations for the stockholders. We must learn to run our organizations for the stakeholders. So there's a difference between stockholders and stakeholders. Stockholders are the people who've invested money and get a return. Stakeholders are the people whose lives are affected by the choices that are made within the company. And so Dietz is arguing and keeps saying that your company will be better in the long run if you engage your stakeholders in decision making. He wants a democratic, egalitarian workplace. And he makes lists of the stakeholders. You know, it's investors, workers, consumers, suppliers, host communities, the greater society, and the world community. So he says all those people have to be involved if you're going to be running your organization in the interests of everybody instead of a few. And he gives cases where this is the case. I mean, I told my systems class the story of the Caterpillar company in Brazil, Caterpillar factory in Brazil, where it was a factory that was losing money. They sent a manager from France there to see if he could turn it around. He went, he looked at it, he said, what you need to do is give me 3 years to turn this around and not expect any profits from us. Let us take any profits we make and plow them back in here. And so what he did, he began to form groups of the workers to talk about what was going on. He began to pour the money back into community health, building roads, building child care centers, making educational opportunities available, bringing in other business into the community. And so by the end of 3 years, they were producing a huge profit for the company. But it was only because in the short term, they had made another decision. And they had restructured themselves in a more democratic way that involved the workers, the stakeholders, the community, the workers, their wives, their children, in the life of the company. So, I mean, there are examples of this. And Dietz says, look at these examples. Don't just go in the short term and exploit your workers and use them up. And he's got a lot of language that he uses to talk about that. He's got Saturn Corporation, where people have more say. He's got other examples of corporation businesses that have done this, and they've had long-term success by creating these kinds of models of corporate life. So this is called Dietz's critical theory of organizational culture. So it's a critical approach to organizations. All right. So But you're right, feminism is in this, and Cheris Krameray, I don't know if you're familiar with Cheris Krameray. She is a feminist communication scholar who argues that the problem is that language is man language, and it does not adequately express women's experience. So women are at a natural disadvantage in trying to communicate because they must communicate in language that describes men's experience.
Did you ever see Legally Blonde?
What's that?
Did you ever see Legally Blonde?
No, I didn't.
There's this girl. It's like obviously traumatized. There's a girl. And she's like the lesbian. She did the lesbian coalition march. And she's at a party and she's sitting there and she's like fighting with this guy. Because women are always put down, and the words that they use, like semester. So next year we're petitioning the college to have it the spring ovester, and like she's like going on, like obviously it's true.
Right. Well, Kramer will say things like that though, and they will push things like that to say why not, and why can't we use women's experience to structure thought? Because if language structures thought, and language is men's language, then thought is man's way of thinking, not women's way of thinking. So it's a critical theory of language use. All right, we're done. That's all the time we have for tonight. But we may, it's possible we will not meet on December 11th.
Is that the last class?
Yes. I have to be at a meeting in Chicago for distance learning development. So, but it's not, the meeting is not set yet, so I'll let you know.
I don't know if I missed it at the very beginning in terms of what's on the agenda for next week.
Well, I think...
Because I know I'm not going to be ready.
Ready, yeah. What we'll end up doing, we may shift the final then a little bit to be, you write the final, and then we do presentations at the final if we have to. We'll watch how our time goes. Next week, I think I just had in mind an overview, summary, go back to integrate it a little bit.
That we need to do.
I don't think so. No, so work on your stuff. Get your articles, and you have a small paper you're doing too. So work on that.
Should we still be doing a reflection even if there's no new readings?
Yes. Yeah, I would like the reflection. Again, I dropped some of them, so I'm looking for a trend in them.